Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's edition of Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. I am joined in this segment by the wonderful Tova Tolman. Hi, Tova. Thanks for waving. This is an audio medium, even though we are on video. You can say hello.
Oh, hi, Ian.
It's great. It's great to have you. Yeah, thanks for being here for today. Now, I just got an email from one of my students, and the subject line is "Yay" with an exclamation point. And it says,
I know what it's about.
I got into my first college.
Yay!
I got into UMass Amherst. So
Aww.
she is excited. She's and says she still is going on to work on some other applications. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of these decisions coming back, and it might come as a surprise to our listeners that students are already hearing back from schools in December. Of course, if they're regular listeners, they know all about early action and early decision, but maybe don't know what comes next. So let's start with my student here who has been admitted to a school where she's applied early action. Mm-hmm. What's next for her? Is she done? How does this process unfold from here?
She could be done. If she looks
Wouldn't
deep into, wouldn't that be nice? She looked deep into her heart and realized, you know what? UMass Amherst is exactly where I want to go next year. She does the research and she realizes, hold the phone. I don't need to hear from anyone else. I'm done. And she could withdraw her application to all of her schools, notify UMass Amherst, I accept your offer, yay. And she could be done. I think a number of students who apply early action aren't ready to make that commitment on what today is December 8th. I'm not sure when this will air.
The 16th.
And the 16th. Okay. Mm-hmm. So they're probably not quite ready to make that decision just yet.
Yeah.
Maybe they haven't heard from some of their other schools yet. And they're probably going to jump up and down a few times, which they should celebrate, but then take a beat to consider, okay, where else am I still hoping to hear from? What maybe do I take off my list? Because maybe I didn't really want to go to that school. It was just like a backup to my backup. And at this point now I'm confident I have a school that I know I really like that I am in at. I don't need to actually apply to that other school.
What if students have already submitted applications to schools where they're pretty confident they're not going to get in? Would you go through the step of withdrawing or just allow the student to get that decision and then decline the enrollment opportunity later in the spring?
I think it depends how interested they are in that school in genuine and earnest. Are they what we sometimes talk about as trophy hunting, just kind of wanting to see if I could have gotten in, but when push comes to shove, they aren't really all that interested in attending? Or if they kind of, again, look into their heart and realize, oh, rejection probably stinks and stings, certainly, maybe I don't really want to go through that. Yeah. Certainly, if a student isn't all that interested and they think it's pretty unlikely, I rather save the admission office, our colleagues on that side of the desk, the trouble of reviewing their application thoughtfully and carefully if the student isn't all that interested.
Yeah.
If they've already hit submit, they've already paid the application fee, and any part of them is going to be left wondering what if. Yeah. Certainly there isn't all that much harm in letting the chips play out and see how it all does unfold.
Yeah. The one other key addition to this conversation is, and this came from my student, she mentioned they're offering me $16,000 a year. Now that's a pretty good scholarship, but maybe she'd like to negotiate that. Maybe she wants it to be a little bit more because her family needs a little bit more funding in order to make that happen. In that case, it would be very helpful to have additional scholarship offers from other schools.
Absolutely.
And so that is one piece of the puzzle that you might keep in mind is, well, maybe this other school I don't like as much, but maybe it's going to be more generous in terms of the scholarship that it offers me. And that makes it a better opportunity at the end of the day. So you could finagle your list a little bit at this point based on some of the information that you're getting about getting into a school. But I think a lot of students kind of stand pat. You get that first decision, you're in. It's like, all right, great. Let's. I'm ready for more. Bring it on. Yeah. Now, what about the bad news? You don't get in early action. You're denied outright. Now you can't reapply. That's it for that particular year. A lot of students think, okay, well, I'll just apply in the regular round, and nope, it's off. It's over. What do students do with respect to the rest of their list at that point in time? How do they think about other schools that they may be choosing to apply to, especially given the narrow window here between December 16th and the end of the calendar year when most of those regular decision deadlines come up?
Right. One, I'd say don't panic. Two, look back at your list. Was it a balanced list? Was this a school you were expecting to get into? Was this a school you had in your sort of safety, no problem category where you were pretty darn confident you were getting in and you didn't, and now you need to reevaluate your list perhaps? Or was this a school you probably weren't getting into anyway, or was a stretch, or it could have gone either way? And I think it's important to look at that disappointing news under that lens and making sure you understand, was this a surprise or not? Even if it is still a punch in the gut, it isn't necessarily going to impact the rest of your list. I would, take careful stock of your list though. If it was a school you considered to be a sure thing, look at the rest of your list. If, oh shoot, I don't necessarily have enough balance, now might be a very good time to take these next 2 weeks, 3 weeks to find another school or two. Not to start throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks, but careful selection of maybe another targeted school or two where you are quite confident you will get in and that you'd be excited about attending.
Yeah. To put just some institutions as an example here, let's say I'm a Massachusetts kid. I know I want to go to school in Massachusetts. I've applied early action to UMass Amherst. I'm going to apply a regular decision to Harvard and MIT coming up in January. And I don't get in to UMass Amherst early action.
Okay. And that's all I have coming is Harvard and MIT?
Harvard and MIT. I just want the Massachusetts schools. That's it.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. There are no other schools in Massachusetts between Harvard, MIT,
just
and UMass
those
Amherst.
Right. But if those are the only other two I'm looking at,
right,
that's a bad plan. Right?
I'd say that's a terrible plan.
But on the flip side, if I apply early action to MIT and I don't get in, but I'm applying to UMass Amherst regular decision, that outcome at MIT doesn't really say anything about whether I might get in at UMass Amherst or not, because MIT is so selective relative to UMass Amherst. And I gave this advice to a student of mine who's applying early action only to Caltech and MIT. I said, look, you're going to start to hear back from schools. Don't be affected by the potential for bad news here, because these schools really don't admit a lot of kids. It's more likely you don't get in than that you do.
Right.
But don't let that information affect how you feel about your whole process. And he was like, yeah, you're right. I know these are tough schools. I really want to get in, but I'm not going to let that affect how I feel about the rest of my applications.
Absolutely.
What about defers? Let's just throw a wrench in this, right? Defers are like, you know what? We don't know yet. We'll tell you later. Come back and see us in the spring,
Right. Yeah.
What do you do then?
You listen to them. What do they say in their letter? Are they just not ready to make a decision? Do they need more information?
Yeah.
If they need more information, what are they asking for? Do they want updated grades? I will say, yes, they do. Absolutely. If they want updated grades, send them when your first semester finishes. Ask your guidance counselor. Come January, take stock. Are you still super excited about that school? Has your interest perhaps faded a bit? If not, and you are still really interested, let them know. Unless they explicitly say, please do not send us anything. And I'm looking at you, Michigan. Other than that,
the most successful applicants send us only what we require. Yeah, Michigan.
Yes, Michigan. We love you, University of Michigan. But other schools often say, please let us know of your continued interest. And it would absolutely behoove that student to write a short, thoughtful, concise note about how interested they remain. If they do remain to be their first choice school, say so. Yeah. What other updates do you have since they last, not just since they last reviewed your application, but since you last applied? Maybe you were eager and on top of your game and you applied in September and it's now January 15th and you have all kinds of updates for them. Yeah. Share that, get it in by the middle of January, late January at the latest. And then you see, honestly, it really ranges the gamut. As to, well, you looked like you maybe wanted to say something before I jump in as to what could happen.
I always want to say something, Tova.
This is new. This is new information to me.
How should students feel psychologically about a defer? Is it closer to an admit or closer to a deny for an early action applicant? And I don't say it depends. I know that's the answer.
That is the answer.
When you are deferred,
widely.
When you are deferred, is that good news? Or
not bad news.
Okay. All right.
Okay. I mean, it could, if they knew you had no chance, if they knew they did not want you, if they knew you were not properly prepared for their school, if they knew in no world were you getting in, they would have denied you.
Except for some schools that don't deny anybody in early action. There are a small handful of them.
a handful. That is a rare exception.
Right.
It exists, but that is not the common practice. Traditionally, in most cases, they are deferring you because, well, let's just be honest for a second. And it's a little cold. And this is why it does kind of sting and it is disappointing. They're telling you, hey, you didn't make the first cut, right? You weren't the very top of the applicant pool. But in most circumstances, you look like someone we might have wanted to admit it if we had more room. We're just not sure how competitive the rest of the applicant pool is going to be. We need to be conservative here. So let's see who else applies in regular. Let's see what you send us. Maybe we want to see how interested you really are. Maybe in some circumstances, we didn't think you were all that interested. It seemed like a slam dunk for you. So we just kind of want to see if you care. And then they'll reevaluate. And at some schools, you still have a great shot, maybe a 50% shot. At other schools, maybe less.
Yeah.
I didn't say it depends.
No, you didn't. Not literally, but like you kind of did. So
because it does depend.
And I think it's fair to say, and maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you won't. The more selective a school is, the less good news a defer is. I think a lot of students will say, "Oh, great, I got deferred." I mean, I personally was like, "Great, I got deferred at Harvard. This is good news." Harvard defers almost everyone that applies early action, and so usually the most selective schools are not going to have a regular decision pool that is going to be weak relative to the early pool.
I will give you that. It's not going to be weak relative to the early pool. That I think is a true statement. But at the schools that I worked at, two of which were pretty darn selective, we weren't deferring anyone we weren't seriously considering and interested in.
That's good.
There were, exceptions here and there for a student we really just wanted to encourage and say, way to go. But that was the exception. Usually we were deferring you because we really thought you had a shot and wanted to reconsider.
Now, hold on. Is that schools that used early decision or schools that used early action?
Both.
Okay, cool. Now, I want to pivot a little bit to early decision here because I think that the defer for me, I worked at Reed, which had only early decision, not early action while I was there. And so I would agree with you that a deferral there, we wouldn't defer students unless we were considering them. And we always needed to see more information from that student because it was still an ED commitment. We still knew that student was interested in Reed. Now, they weren't committed if we admitted them after a deferral, but we knew that they had enough interest to have applied ED the first time around. Right? Sure. So defers, I feel like, are a little bit different in the context of that ED circumstance. They feel like a little bit more of a piece of good news than they do in an early action decision. And maybe that's just me pontificating, but.
Well, I don't know. That's a really interesting thing to consider. And I almost want to get a panel of former admission officers across our team.
We have a lot of them. We can ask. Yeah.
Can we poll our team and report back to the podcast in a couple of weeks what our findings were? Yeah. I did not see that at this. So I worked at Fordham, I worked at Barnard, I worked at Columbia. At Barnard, early decision, we would defer students. And at Fordham, early action, who they now have early decision. They did not when I worked there. We deferred students in early action. I think honestly, in the end at Fordham, now it was less dramatically so less selective than Barnard, but we would freely admit students from an early action round. And at Barnard, sometimes our hands were tied and we weren't able to admit as many students. Maybe even more students applied come regular than we thought, and they were even more competitive. And just because they had applied in early, I don't know that they had such a greater competitive chance compared to an early action deferral.
So we don't know how to tell you how to feel here. Yeah. About these two outcomes.
You feel disappointed. It's fine to feel disappointed. I get that.
It is.
It's not an admit. But it wasn't an outright deny. They would have, at most circumstances, denied you if you had no business applying.
And it's quite interesting to see students, how their psychology shifts. And I think it can be a really good thing for them, actually, to be committed to a school for early and then find, okay, I got deferred. They're able to kind of look at the landscape a little bit more broadly, consider the possibilities. And I've seen plenty of students who've been deferred by an ED school who are then admitted later, who decide that they would rather go somewhere else that accepted them because they've moved on. And I think that can be a really good thing for students in some cases. Now, speaking of moving on, if you are denied early decision, that's it. And obviously this was your top choice because you're applying ED to this school. Any words of wisdom for those students who are getting bad news on the early decision front in the coming weeks?
It's okay to be disappointed. You can't be devastated. This is not a measure of your self-worth. They are not. I know it feels like they're denying you, but they aren't. They're denying your application. If they could take everyone they wanted, they'd probably take you to, I'd say, get over it. I know that sounds
get over it. No, I mean,
but it is one of those things where it stinks. And then congrats. This is an easy, safe place in your life to start to learn how to handle rejection, because it stinks. It does. But it's time to move on then.
Tova, by the way, only says get over it to hypothetical students, not to real authentic students.
Never.
Let's finish on a high note and talk about students who are admitted early decision. You got into your first choice school.
Jump up and down.
You're done with this process. What's next for those students?
Please, within 24 hours, withdraw your application from anywhere else you might have.
24 hours.
Please,
the clock is ticking. It's like an episode of 24. Yeah, I can hear that clock ticking.
It's disrespectful to not. The other schools are going to be working on your application. If you can spare them from wasting an admit on you, that would be really kind and considerate. They won't hold hard feelings against you. They'll get it, tell them why, and then confirm back with your school, sign whatever they ask you to sign, join admitted student groups, and get excited. You're done. And don't gloat to your friends. Don't gloat to your friends. You can be a little bit smug, but don't gloat.
And I mean, the friends and the community piece, I think, is kind of an important one here, just to acknowledge that not every school has early action. Not every student applies early action. Not every student applies early decision. And I have seen students who have been really concerned in this moment in the calendar because they are not hearing back from schools and their friends are. But if you didn't apply early action anywhere or early decision anywhere, you are not supposed to be hearing back. So don't feel like the absence of news is bad news. I just remember one of my favorite students of all time. She applied only regular decision. She didn't have any clear commits. She was so concerned in mid-December that she hadn't heard from anywhere. I had to remind her, you didn't apply early.
You shouldn't have heard. This wasn't the time for you to hear.
By March, she'd gotten in everywhere. So, that's not necessarily going to happen for you, but don't allow yourself to be nervous by circumstances that are outside your control.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other parting words of wisdom?
No, that's it. Go talk to someone about finance and making sure you can pay for it all. Maybe in the next segment. Seems
important. When we come back, we're going to do exactly that. So thank you for the intro, Tova. I appreciate it.
Just gunning for your job, Ian.
All right. Don't go away, everyone. We'll be right back.